Thank you for joining us, everybody. Today we are sitting down with R.L. Bryer, the author of Blockchain Project Renaissance 1 and 2. Thank you so much, R.L., for joining us today.
Yeah, absolutely. It's my pleasure to come on your show. I really appreciate it.
So what's on your mind these days?
We're 28 days away from the Bitcoin halving now. So my time is spent every day on just keeping up with the news in the Bitcoin and blockchain space. And Bitcoin's a rabbit hole. So even though I've been in Bitcoin since the very beginning, basically, the onset of the network, I'm still learning every day. So that's on my mind. And I've got a couple other projects I'm working on right now. So just staying busy.
What are you seeing when it comes to the blockchain halving? What's the sentiment? And then also, how will the current geopolitical and economic events affect this blockchain halving, in your opinion? And let's be more specific, Bitcoin halving.
Yeah, great question. Mostly I'll speak in terms of the Bitcoin halving, since it's the king of the ecosystem, the blockchain ecosystem. But I think that in terms of the economic, I would call it a catastrophe that's going on around the world right now. This is really what Bitcoin was born, to combat. So out of the 2008 financial crisis, Satoshi Nakamoto, launched the Bitcoin network, and the first application on that network was the Bitcoin cryptocurrency. And there's a reason that most blockchains start with cryptocurrency, the decentralized application of cryptocurrency first, and that's to give incentive to miners and stuff to secure the network. And everybody loves money, so it's just a natural starting place. But as we've seen over the last 11 years now in the Bitcoin space, it's really grown up, and it's become, in my opinion, the world's best money. So I know that you're interested in gold and specie money, and so am I. But I think that the characteristics of Bitcoin are just a little bit superior to that of specie money, and obviously that of fiat money. So as we've seen, over the last 50 years since the United States left the gold standard in 1971, which was the peg to the dollar peg to gold. When Nixon took us off that, it's just been a constant, we went from the world's largest debtor, or the world's largest creditor, to the world's largest debtor. And as governments grow, which all governments have a tendency to do, they can't hold back the appetite to print paper money and devalue currencies over time. So it's like their only cure for any problem is to print. But really, the printing is what has got us into this problem in the beginning. So I think overall, this is like the perfect timing for the third Bitcoin halving, because I think that this will probably lead to exactly what a lot of people that study this and look at it quite frequently have anticipated, and that's hyper Bitcoinization here in the near future, where we see $100,000 plus Bitcoin, or some people think even over $1 million, which I actually don't think is out of the realm of possibility. I don't think we'll see that in this cycle. We're in a bull market right now, which started February 19th, February 8th, 2019. And I think we'll probably wrap up somewhere in early 2022, and then we'll probably see another bear market if history repeats. But I think that, this is kind of a long-winded answer, but I think that this is, exactly what Satoshi envisioned would happen. He was just so ahead of the game in so many different regards. I think this is I think we'll see a lot more people across the world. Bitcoin, it's kind of a joke that Bitcoin just eats fiat. And I really believe that that's what we're going to see, is more people looking for a store of value, heading into gold, silver, Bitcoin, and hard money.
There's a lot to break down there. So I would say that, so when it comes to specie money, as you term it, or gold and silver, I like contrasts. And, I play guitar and I've listened to music, and I've noticed that, I really like contrasts in music, and it's quite a common thing. So let's say and these are not endorsements of any bands, but you see like the Pixies, for instance, they had like loud choruses and quiet verses. The Beatles would have big kind of jumps in the notes that they were using or chords, which was a form of contrast. And I like that also in my portfolio, if you will. So I see that how gold and silver is such a contrast to something like digital currency, and namely Bitcoin, that I see them as almost hedges of one another. And gold and silver, of course, in my opinion, is not really an investment. I think it's more insurance than anything. And I
Hmm.
see that I would classify, while Bitcoin goes far beyond an investment, I think that in traditional language or the traditional kind of scope of finance, that Bitcoin has more investment type characteristics, but of course it also has those money characteristics. The, no matter how you feel about the block size, and so I'm curious. Could you discuss a little about the current climate? You called it a catastrophe. Why do you see it as a catastrophe? What are the what's been the cause and what will be the effect?
Sure. Yeah, I like how you put that in the analogy of the bands. That was cool. Well, paper money, Voltaire said paper money always reverts to its real value. He used the word intrinsic, or at least that's what he cited as saying intrinsic value, which I don't really care for the word intrinsic. Um, but he said paper money always reverts to its intrinsic value, which is zero. I like to change it to real, like I said, but it does which is, zero. So I just view paper money is money by decree. The state decrees that it has value, and really the only backing, like I said, it doesn't have any gold or silver or any other backing. We just have been indoctrinated to believe it has value, and it's really just backed by the might of the military today. So as they print more and more, they steal our purchasing power. So a lot of people really, it's amazing to me. And the more I started studying this stuff, at the end of last decade, or the end of 2009, 2010 is when I really started getting interested in money. And the majority of people really just don't understand money at all. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I really believe that, it's in, the people that control the education system, and the majority of people are now subjects of state schooling. They just don't want you to understand, the characteristics of what is good money and why money has value. And paper money, just because you print it, doesn't give it value. And what I was talking about, with Voltaire's quote of intrinsic value, a lot of gold bugs and people like that like to note that gold has intrinsic value. But in my opinion, and this has been backed up by Austrian theorists. I would like to study the Austrian School of Economics, and that's sort of, it's divided in that school too. Is that all value is subjective value, the subjective value theory. And that's really, a lot of people say, well, where does Bitcoin get its value? It's not really in the physical form unless you print out a paper wallet or you make it tangible yourself. But I believe that value is in the eye of the valuer, and it's the properties of any money or anything that give it value. So uh, I think that the idea that paper money has value is beginning to wane. And as we live in more of an increasingly digital epoch, um, I think that people are going to realize that paper money is very cultish, and just that states really are the clumsy organisms that I believe them to be. And I think a lot of people are going to, you know, uh, catch up maybe with some of the people that are really interested in this stuff. It's economics isn't the most interesting thing for some people, and other people really enjoy to look at it. And I just think that eventually people will have to understand money more than they do now, and that'll be really out of crisis. And I think that's really what we're heading into. And it's the seeds are sort of sown already for that, since there is no backing to the currency, or that has real properties. I don't believe that just paper money for the sake of paper money and old beliefs is enough to carry it through.
And I would amend that a bit and say that it doesn't really matter if it's paper or digital, but rather the question is whether or not it's by fiat or by choices, free choice of association and medium. And like for instance, if we were given like a digital dollar that was by fiat decreed to be the main medium of transacting for a jurisdiction or territory, I would then like ask like, well, who by whose decree and why and for what reasons? I don't think that in a free market setting, uh, as you mentioned the Austrian setting. So when I kind of think about money in a freer kind of society, I don't see there being one medium that would float to the top and be used by all parties. I would anticipate that there would be a basket of choices that would be chosen
Hmm.
above all others. But at the end of the day, I think that there would still be a lot of direct transactions between producers and consumers, and the consumers would want directly whatever the producer is producing in exchange for perhaps a basket of certain things, or maybe if you got two producers who get together, they could make a trade, like say an egg for a desk. But for me, the question isn't whether it's paper or not. The question is whether it's by fiat or not. And we can get a digital currency that was decreed by fiat to be the kind of dominant currency, if you will.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I agree with you 100%. I think that money is a good like anything else. So the competition is important to me, and that's why I reject these maximalists in the Bitcoin space or the gold space that say that this has to be the only money we use, or that's become pretty popular now in the Bitcoin space, especially that there's these toxic, they call themselves toxic Bitcoin maximalist, and I think that's just the most ridiculous idea ever. It's these people that have come in the last couple of years, the majority of them, and they really don't understand the Austrian ethos and where this why we even got Bitcoin to begin with, and competition is going to create the best money, and we don't want Bitcoin to turn into digital fiat, or basically is what the Bitcoin decree is, what I've been calling it the last couple of days, is that we don't want Bitcoin to not have any competition, because then it just becomes this monolithic thing in itself that doesn't have any reason to get better, or scale, and doesn't have the characteristics that we want it to have. So I agree with you. I think that there's a need for privacy too, and that's why I'm interested in some privacy projects. And I think, like you said, that there's different goods that suit themselves to different currencies a lot of times, and that we're going to see. I think the competition is going to be just you know imperative for crypto and just the economy overall, as we see paper money maybe in its last days, or fiat, overall. um, Other states are already, I mean, it seems like every country around the world now is interested in their own cryptocurrency, in finger quotations. They're not really like the petro in Venezuela, they're not really cryptocurrencies per se. They're going to be highly traceable. um, they're going to be subject to the same sort of inflation, and that's the beautiful thing about Bitcoin, is that the finite supply of 21 million is in the code, and it's not up for debate. Like there's no person that can come in and just say, hey, we're going to change this right now, this is what it is. No politician per se.
And I would also amend a little bit that I totally agree that the subjective value of money is, I mean, everything is human nature. It's like human behavior. Like our entire world is just a bunch of humans doing things in the world, and we like to abstract things with disciplines and jargon also. But at the end of the day, all of the data, figures, numbers, analysis that we are looking at when we're talking about politics or economics or government or you name it, it's all just a way of explaining the way in which humans behave. That's for sure. With Bitcoin, there is this other interesting element, and people ask, well, where does it get its value from? It costs a lot of money to be able to mine Bitcoin. It takes up a lot of electricity and cost, equipment costs, facility costs, etc. And all of this kind of forms like a basis for which a price to be realized. So, for instance, the miners have to, when they mine Bitcoin, they're only incentivized if they're able to sell those Bitcoins at a profit
Right.
to pay for their operations, etc.
Yeah, that's sort of a tough one to completely wrap your head around, because there is the argument that, like, I think Roger Ver made, that that's sort of an idea of the labor theory of value, like sort of a more of a communist idea, but in a way it's not, because I think that that shows that the miners believe that it has subjective value, so they're willing. I would combat his argument that that's the labor theory of value. I would combat his argument that I would agree with what you said, and add that that is like proving that people believe it has subjective value, that they're willing to uh, put the time and the resources, the land, labor, and capital, the three factors of production, and put those together and make this economic calculation or determination that they are going to get something in the long run for their um, for their efforts, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, and I've also heard recently that a miner told me that, like, unless you have 5 million in startup capital, then there's really no point for you in getting into the Bitcoin mining game because it is so competitive at this point. Um, and then there is also potentially, and this is kind of this kind of moves us away from the labor theory. There are miners out there who, because Bitcoin is a deflationary currency, or for any other subjective reason they choose, would mine Bitcoin at a loss as a speculation, as a speculative pursuit, based on they believe that the future value will be there.
Absolutely, and that's what we're witnessing right now, because the price to mine is going to rise here in a few days, and I believe this is like the beauty of capitalism at work, and why I'm such a proponent of Bitcoin is because it's a free market. It's like the only free market I view. Um, and I think it's like our way of getting back to like peer-to-peer capitalism where the state isn't even involved at all, and this this halving is going to flush away the people that didn't take the factors of production, and get ahead of this, get ahead of the block reward halving coming up. So the inflation rate, for people that don't know, here in 28 days is going to go from 1,800 Bitcoin a day to 900, and then the actual inflation percentage will drop from let's see, it's 3.8 to 1.9%, I think. I'm not looking at it right now, but I'm pretty sure those are the figures. And yeah, so what we'll see is, I think we'll see, the people that got ahead of this will hold on to some Bitcoin as long as they can, and that'll take even more out of the circulating supply, and the price will rise as it has in after the prior two halvings. But now we're just getting closer and closer to the finite supply. I mean, we won't see that for another, some people speculate 100 years, but it matters, and it really does matter in the terms of having a circulating supply that is finite, or a total supply that is finite, and then only so many available each day.
You mentioned that the price of mining was going to increase here in the next few days. Could you elaborate?
Yeah, so all the Bitcoin network is, like you mentioned, it's extremely expensive to mine a Bitcoin. I don't know the exact price today, somewhere around $7,000, I think. So when this happens, the block rewards are cut in half. So when you find a Bitcoin right now, you are rewarded, or you and your mining pool, depending on how you're doing it. You can set up mining pools and become a part of those. It's going to go from 12 and a half each 3.5, 4 years. We have this event called the halving. So in 28 days, it's going to go from 12 and a half Bitcoin per block found to 6.25. So basically, you're getting rewarded, obviously half is what you would today for your efforts, and the cost of mining basically goes up in that regard because you're getting less output, or less output for your input.
I want to dig into price. I want to get back into the Austrian economics side of things because you seem quite well read in that. I do want to talk about why you are making some of those predictions that you are on the price. What are you looking at? The reason being, people love to talk about price.
Yeah, price is such a I do like to make these predictions, but it's not something I solely focus on. It's more for fun, and I hope nobody takes this is definitely not financial advice. I always like to mention that. This is just something that I like to do in my own,
Well, I write too a lot, and let me tell you something that like even the like unsophisticated price analysis gets
Mhm.
more traffic than really good articles about interesting tech, etc. Stories about people building cool stuff, like the vision for that we all kind of were attracted to in Bitcoin from the start, like, Chancellor on the brink of second bailout, digital gold, all this stuff,
Mhm.
like crappy price analysis trumps it all. So now that's not what we're going to be talking about here. But we're gonna have. I'm interested to hear what you kind of think about and why you're making how you see price unfolding. You mentioned 2022 as a date to look out for the next bear market. What kind of indicators are you looking at? Can you just riff on price for a little bit?
Sure. Well, it really, I mean, it has as much to do with the variables have as much to do with, in my opinion, with Bitcoin as the external variables. In what we sort of covered a little bit with not just the United States central bank, but the central banks all over the world are printing money, and it's really just a race to the bottom at this point. It's currency wars where nation states try to export their debt to other countries through inflation, and it obviously has a drastic impact on each state's citizens, but it also has an impact on the other countries they're trying to export the debt to. So what you have is central banks around the world. Well, they see one sees another one printing, so the other one prints, and I view Bitcoin as like the escape route out of this for people like you and I, or just people trying to store their value, or use sound money, is that and I think this is going to have a drastic impact on the price. And the reason I say 2022 is that if you look at these cycles in Bitcoin since 2009, it's been like a bull bear scenario they've each lasted like 3 years or so. There's no way to say exactly. I don't how long it's going to last, but it just seems like uh, to me early 2022, late 2021, we'll probably see the new maybe the new all-time high or something like that, and then we'll start to see that pullback that we've seen, which is historically through the first 11 years. And the first, we've seen a few of these bull bear scenarios is a pretty hard drawback. It's been like 90%. So but each time we end up heading into the halving at a higher clip than the first. So the last one we headed in at $600, and we ended up just under 20,000, or at 20,000, depending on the exchange you look at. So in my opinion, there's a lot of things to look at. I've made the prediction that we're going to hit somewhere around $65,000. So I made that prediction last year when I pretty much called the exact day that the bull market began. You can actually hop on my YouTube channel. It's at Pittsburgh Hodler, and you can look up when I called that. I think the video is called like Bitcoin will hit $65,000 this bull run, or I might have even said that year. But I've definitely realized that this is a longer term game even since then, and that I stick with that figure though. There's something about that number that I feel like that's a good prediction. Other people I actually saw the stock to flow guy. He's on, I think he's called Plan B on Twitter. He recently put out one that said somewhere around $70,000 if you track like stock to flow of the Bitcoins and all that. And that's a whole nother thing that you could get into. But I think and that sort of reassured me. I wasn't looking at stock to flow actually when I made that prediction, but for some reason that number just keeps appearing. 65, 70K seems to be just reappearing in my universe. So I'm going to stick with that number.
What are some of the indicators that you look at? What actionable advice do you have for people that really don't have any idea how to look at price and analyze it? Of course, there's the charts, etc. But I'm just curious, what actionable advice do you have for me and the listeners?
Yeah, well, when I like we talked about a little bit, I'm actually interested in more than one project, so I will give overall advice for different cryptocurrencies, how to analyze those, and they're in my books at Bryer.io. You mentioned Blockchain Project Renaissance 1 and 2. I break those down in my books, but to give a quick one, I would say like you want to look at overall in the crypto space. Finite supply is huge, and that's the reason that I think that a lot of these currencies have such a future. At least the top 25. I have like 20, 25 maybe that I think will really provide utility. And I think that's 21 finite supply, 21 million. How can you beat that? The rules of the game, and unlike the government, Bitcoin's not changing the rules of the game during the game. So that's huge to me. And then the properties. What does it do? What is it made of? Is it Bitcoin isn't the fastest cryptocurrency in the world anymore, but it has it's like the highest security network in the world, and it's decentralized all over the world. Where any average Joe with a Raspberry Pi can set up a node and run a full node and have that entire history of the Bitcoin network right in front of them. So there's a lot of important things to look at. I think team is important. Who's working on the project? You want to check and see who's working on the project. What else? There's just so much to look at. I'll tell you something that I'm really interested in right now is Chainlink, and I think that just to kind of go a little bit further into this is that I think Chainlink is going to provide. And I'm still learning about Chainlink myself, is going to provide a lot of value to the blockchain space that people haven't really caught on to yet. It's actually up over around 600% for the year, or it's between 500 and 600. It's kind of funny to talk about 100% difference, but in between there. And it was up over 100% before the stock market, crashed a few weeks ago, and then we had the cryptocurrency pullback. But what Chainlink is doing is they're providing a system, a network for decentralized oracles to talk and communicate. So blockchains are going to be able to execute smart contracts with external databases and in real time. So the value there is just astronomical. That's really what I was writing about in my books is interoperability. And another reason I'm not a big Bitcoin maximalist is because all of these networks are going to eventually talk to one another, or at least the ones that are going to provide the most value to consumers and end users. And that's really where a lot of the value is going to come from. So the companies that and the blockchains that are working to have an interoperable method are the ones that are really I'm interested in. And I look at Bitcoin as like the money one, but then there's Ethereum, which is like the one that people are going to build a lot of these smart contracts and stuff on. And then Chainlink will work as an in-between these, so that there's so much to look at. And then I look at privacy coins, and I'm really interested in those too. And I wrote for one last summer, and I'm talking with them again about doing some writing for them, their community, and it's Epic Cash, and it's a Mimblewimble project. And Mimblewimble is a way for users to remain private. It was thought in the early days of Bitcoin that Bitcoin was a completely private network, and we found out through some unfortunate events like the Silk Road, that it's not private at all, that it can be traced. Your name's not on there, but you can, somebody's good enough, they can track you down eventually. So I think that privacy coins are actually going to be very important. I look for one of those to bust into the top 5 sometime this decade. At least that's my hope. And that, that's valuable. That's value to a certain, sector of the world too. I think a lot of our, rights have been stolen from us in this digital age, and I view privacy as essential to freedom and free markets. So I think that will have a lot of value. So there's just so much to cover when you're talking about how to determine value. But I think those are some good ways to determine, what's going to, be popular or provide value and actually be priced accordingly here in the near future.
I had a hypothesis that I worked with for a few years where I kind of de-emphasized privacy in the modern age, and I thought that people just simply wanted a fair deal for their data. But then I realized people don't understand that there is no such thing as privacy online, that every little thing you do is tracked and potentially stored via nanotechnology and external servers. We've been taken away from this personal computer paradigm, if it ever even existed, and now our OSs are literally on the cloud. Everything's going to the cloud, and that kind of swung the pendulum in my sentiment back towards understanding the true value of privacy. And so I agree with you on that front. Now, I wanted to ask, what implications does Chainlink have for Bitcoin?
Good question. And I would say probably not too vast in the actual BTC realm. That's something that I haven't done a ton of research on. But since Bitcoin really doesn't work, they're not really working on smart contracts in Bitcoin. Maybe eventually with layered scaling, Bitcoin above the consensus, layer, there's Lightning. The Lightning network runs on layer 2. Maybe someday they'll get to that. But that's the beautiful thing about the free market, is that I really don't even want to see them try to do it. I think that should be left to Ethereum or EOS or something else. Not a big EOS guy, but just something else that was built to, do things like that a little bit more specifically. So yeah, I don't think, and it's also interesting is if you look at all of the partnerships that Chainlink has made, it's actually it's remarkable. Just type in Chainlink partnerships, and I think the one I was looking at was from last month. So just Google that and start reading about all the things that their team is really getting after it. So I see a lot of value in that in the future.
You mentioned 25 coins that you're interested in that could provide utility. Could you elaborate on that? Maybe mention some of the coins, highlight a few of them.
Sure. Yeah. Well, let me pull up. One of the market sites real quick. I'll just give you a top 5 or top 10 if that's all right.
Yeah, please. And then while you pull that up, I'll just say that we got 21 million Bitcoins that will ever be mined, and many of those will be lost and have been lost. So we're looking not only a programmatically deflationary digital asset, but also one which will have deflationary pressure arisen from human behavior as well.
Absolutely. So obviously I'll start with the king. I'm just going to go down the list. Bitcoin, clearly we've outlined why that's important. Ethereum is going to be, it's not going anywhere in my opinion. They have very dedicated community. I'm not a fan of XRP. It's in the 3rd spot on the coin market valuation right now. It's highly centralized, and people seem to not be able to differentiate the difference between XRP and the Ripple Corporation or company. And there's a major difference in equity in a company and valuation of a token, and their community just can't seem to separate the two. And I hate to see it, but they just keep getting dumped on they're the people that run that continually dump the price on the people that are holding the token, and they just don't understand how it works. I actually am not. I'm not a huge fan of the name of Bitcoin Cash, but I do think that Bitcoin Cash, with bigger blocks, serves as a good medium of exchange. And Roger Ver is an Austrian guy, so I like Bitcoin. I like the idea of being able to send money around the world, for a couple pennies. I'm not secure. I'm not so sure how secure that network is, but I also was one of the first people in Litecoin, so I still like Litecoin. It came out in 2011, I think, or 2012. So long ago now, but it's tried and tested, and it's been hanging in there very solidly for the better part of a decade now too. So it's number 7. I still like Litecoin. EOS, while I'm not a huge proponent, it's a little bit centralized. I think it has, potential to provide some things that the market will like with the smart contracts and stuff. A lot of people are talking about Tezos now. I'm not going to pretend that I've done a ton of research into Tezos. There's only so many hours in the day. And I like to joke about how when I first got into Bitcoin back in, the very beginning, I would just look for, any sort of articles or things about it. And they weren't there. It was like you could read all the stuff about Bitcoin or watch all the stuff in maybe an hour or 2 a day tops. And now you can't even read all the stuff about Bitcoin in a week that comes out in a day probably.
I'll jump in real quick and say that, so for my research, Tezos seems to have a enthusiastic developer community that thinks that Tezos has a superior kind of technology basis to a lot of the other, I guess, Turing complete blockchains out there. Continue.
Right, I agree. That's what I've heard too. Like I said, I haven't done a deep dive into Tezos, but a lot of people seem to be pretty high on it. Chainlink, like I mentioned, it's at number 12 now. I actually think it'll be in the top 10 pretty soon. It's only the gap between it and the number 10 spot, which is ironically Tezos, is very little in market valuation. Manero, like I mentioned, privacy. I think Monero is going to stick around. It's one of the earliest privacy coins, like 2014, I think, or something. I think they've done a good job with that. Dash, I think Dash is good. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, yeah, no problem. I say we're kind of running out. We're running up against the hour here, and I want to get into a couple more topics. First, of being Austrian economics.
Okay.
Like, what are the main principles you think people should know about Austrian economics? And then after that, I want to talk about your books.
Okay, let's just get into that then. But yeah, Austrian economics. I think the most important thing is understanding value, and that the boom. Like we talked about subjective value, but then you want to talk about the business cycle, and that's really what we see is in the problems in the United States and around the world is central banks are like one of the major planks of the Communist Manifesto. And what central banks do is they make a society think they're richer than they are until the reckoning, basically. And when they print all this money and put it into the economy, they basically convince people that are entrepreneurs that they have more wealth than they do. So then they go and build something or start, for example, build a house. And it's one of the major analogies that people like to use is the master bricklayer. And they get to the final brick, they get close to the final brick and realize that they don't actually have enough to finish the house. So that's really what the Austrian school, it's not a prescriptive, it doesn't tell you what to do, it's more of a descriptive school. So it's the science of human action is economics. And the Austrian school just does an amazing job of explaining that. And that's really what I got into in my books, is trying to mesh the Austrian theory of the business cycle and economics. I'm a really big Murray Rothbard fan, Hans Hermann Hoppe, Ludwig von Mises. These are some of the Austrian greats and masters of that school. And I really got into that in late 2000, 9, 10, when I found Bitcoin. It was like a double barrel conversion, and a light bulb just went off. And then I was posting, buy Bitcoin a lot on, or at least look into it on my social media. And then a few years later, I started the Medium blog that you can find at R.L. Bryer. And then a few years after that, it was like 2014, I actually started, writing a little bit about it, at least that I can find. And then, outside of social media. And then I saw on the last bull run in 2016 or 17 that a lot of people were getting scammed with like the BitConnects of the world and stuff like that. And I felt like I was ready to tackle from an Austrian perspective. I didn't want to put out something that I didn't think I was ready to do. So it was just kind of the right timing. So I put out a blockchain project Renaissance, and tried to just give it's a short book. Both of my books are 50 pages. So I just wanted to make like a concise thing, and somebody that might not be going to read Murray Rothbard's Man, Economy, and State with Power and Market, a 1,300-page economic treatise. I wanted to try to put as much about Austrian theory and cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, about that ecosystem that I could into one book, and just give my perspective, so people can understand like why things have value, why capitalism is the best system in the world, why entrepreneurs are our benefactors, and just really try to illuminate why I view statism as the enemy of humanity.
Why?
Oh, just the overall just repressive nature of the state, controlling they want to control over every single aspect of our lives, and they do it through its territorial monopoly. And then from that stems, the territorial monopoly through violence and theft of our wages, and then through that comes a judicial monopoly where they are the arbiter of all cases, including cases involving themselves of the state itself. So you can't win against the state. It doesn't work. There's no there's no outside party to reach out to when it comes to getting into a debate with the government. You're just not going to win. And I think that there should be, and that's the beauty of the free market as well, is that there should be an outside a judicial agency that you can reach out to, and you can an arbiter that especially in cases like taxation. I mean, the state decides how much you're going to give them of the fruits of your labor. I'm completely against that sort of idea.
Where can people find your work?
Yeah, the best place to find my work and support it is at Bryer, BRYER.io. All of my articles and a lot of my podcasts, I'll probably be posting this one here shortly, are on my homepage. I also host the Veeries and Numerous podcast that I started at the beginning of this year. There's 15 episodes. That's on there for free. And then the bookstore is under Shop. Blockchain Project Renaissance 1 and 2 are on there. And then I'm also on Twitter at RBRYER23. And I'm pretty active on there. I try to send out around 4 or 5 tweets a day just about what's going on in the Bitcoin space or blockchain space and money and economics. And a lot of my insights are on there too.
We've spoken today with R.L. Bryer, author of Blockchain Project Renaissance 1 and 2. That's 2 50-page books. And thank you so much, R.L., for speaking with us today.
Yeah, Justin, I really appreciate you having me on the show, and it was a pleasure.
My pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for listening.